This episode is brought to you in partnership with Shepherd Pratt, the nation's largest private nonprofit provider of mental health, substance use, special education, developmental disability, and social services. Cincinnati Bengals QB Joe Burrow has quite the list of accolades. This episode is so fun. The Heisman Trophy winner won a national championship with LSU before he led those Bengals to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. His mom, Robin, shares about raising this driven, very focused, yet pretty chill kid. Robin runs the Joe Burrow Foundation with a mission of providing mental health access to the underserved, as well as bringing awareness to food insecurity for school-aged children. Whether you are a football fan or not, you will love meeting Joe's mom. Be sure to stay tuned after the episode for our conversation with Dr. Harsh Trivedi, child psychiatrist and CEO of Shepherd Pratt, about raising resilient kids and so much more. So right now, let's jump into this week's episode. Robin, thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a really fun interview because I've had the opportunity to talk to a few moms of quarterbacks, but I was thinking about this today. I feel like Joe is someone that, he doesn't really put it all out there. So you're just even more intrigued because he's so chill and not, other than the fashion, he's not too flashy, with all the things. So I feel like people are going to love getting to hear more about him as a child and growing up and getting to meet his mom, Robin. So thank you.
You've got his personality pegged, that's for sure.
Well, let's start there. Tell me about Joe as a child. What is a lot of what we do see in him, which comes across as somewhat reserved and chill and all that. Was he like that as a child, or is there another Joey, I should say, he was Joey at the time in there?
Yeah, Joey was really, he was always pretty chill, honestly. I definitely babied him. I definitely babied him.
I love that you can admit that. I'm be proud of it, right?
I honestly still baby him as much as I can, but I think that's important. Kids need to know that their mom is there for them no matter what. And even the little things, I still love to do for him. So, but as a little one, he was for the most part very chill. I worked full time, so he went to the sitter full time, and so we cherished our little moments together a lot. My husband, Jimmy, Joe's dad, traveled a lot when he was small. And so we spent a lot of time alone together, but he was just always pretty chill. He liked to kind of always know what was going to happen. He wanted to know the schedule of events of the day, even when he was little.
Is he still like that now?
He is. He is very routine. He likes a very solid routine. He was, for the most part, always pretty chill. He was always very, he wanted to always do things really, really well. Like from the time he was little bitty, we would, throw him balls in the basement, or he would throw us balls. And if it wasn't the way he thought it should go, then he didn't ever want to quit until he had a really good, whatever it was, a pass or a catch or a basket or a baseball hit. When he was little, we just kept going until he was satisfied with what he thought was a good ending to the outing of whatever sport it was going to be. So
would you say even at that age, and that might seem like kind of a minor example, but that's almost an example for a young child of work ethic and grit and like, I'm going to work till I get this right, which is really not the norm for your average young child.
Yeah. One example I can remember, Joe would have been, he was probably 2.5 or 3 years old. And we literally had just bought him his first little baseball glove. We had a wiffle ball, and my husband was just tossing little balls, to him, to like little pop flies to him in the front yard, only, a few feet. And he was struggling to catch it and struggle. And we finally just said, well, we got to go in and eat dinner. And he did not want to have any part of that. He wanted to keep trying until he caught one. He finally caught one, and we were celebrating and cheering in the front yard. And our neighbors from across the street came out onto their deck, and they were clapping because they had been watching us apparently the whole time, and they were so excited for him too that he finally got one so we could go inside.
That was just a precursor to what his future would be of, people watching him and clapping and applauding and all the things, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's awesome. So now when you met your husband, was he already a coach?
He
Did you
was.
marry into this football
I
world?
did.
Okay, here's the real question. Were you a fan of the sport before you married your husband?
Yes, I was. I definitely was.
Okay.
I grew up in Nebraska. So, Nebraska football is all that. I mean, everybody lives and dies for Nebraska football. So I grew up around it and always loved it. So I didn't understand the depth of time commitment that a
Mhm.
college coach has, well, even a high school coach, honestly, but especially college coaches. That was eye opening to me. But
Mhm.
yes, I married in and knew exactly what I was getting into.
Have you kept up with the moves over the years? Like how many times you guys have moved with your husband's career?
You know what? We've been very lucky, actually. We met in Ames, Iowa, where Jimmy was coaching at Iowa State, and then moved to Lincoln, Nebraska for a couple years, and then Fargo, North Dakota at North Dakota State, and then here to Ohio, where Jimmy spent 14 years as the defensive coordinator. So this, Joe really only had that he remembers really one big move from Fargo to here because the others happened when he was really small. So we were
Mhm.
very fortunate as a coaching family that we had consistency. And part of that was our own, once Joe got to really be in junior high, there wasn't
Mhm.
any no entertaining other jobs, even if
You weren't
people
seeking
called.
the next
Because
opportunity.
Joe had a great group of friends around him and a solid parent base around those kids that we were really good friends with, and we just didn't want to rock the boat and move. So
Tell me about what grade would you say that Joe was in when you guys kind of got the inkling that if he continues to work this hard with this work ethic, he has the potential to play at the next level?
well, that is a very interesting question because honestly, when he was really small, I mean, he was always so good at baseball. I
Mm.
mean, he was a really good baseball player.
And basketball player, right?
And yeah, so then when you got into like junior high, it kind of, well, not even junior high, upper elementary and junior high, it kind of swung towards basketball because he got a lot taller, and he could shoot the ball like crazy. And we really thought he was going to be probably a low level, maybe a MAC basketball player. He was first team All State in basketball as a high school senior, even. Um, but then his sophomore year of football, they had a great season and he threw for a lot of yards. And that I remember one day Joe came home. He said, "Well, maybe basketball is not my sport. Maybe it's football." And I was like, "Maybe. Well, let's see how it goes."
Yeah. But up until then, you kind of thought maybe the basketball track.
Yeah, for sure. We really did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does he play a lot now, just like rec, pick up ball with the guys kind of thing? Does he
He
still love
really
it?
doesn't. I mean, now as a professional athlete, they have to be so careful about getting hurt with their hobbies and recreational activities because they really have to keep in mind if they get hurt doing something that is not football related, it can void their contract even. So they have to be very
Wow.
careful with that.
Yeah. When you think back to all those hours you spent Friday night lights, sitting in those bleachers, watching your boy play football, and now when you drive by the stadium, it says Joe Burrow Stadium.
Yeah.
What in the world is that like as a mom?
It is honestly just surreal every single time we drive by it. We spent so much time there in the concession stand, like feeding kids after practice, after summer practices, all of those things. And now to drive by and see his name on that stadium is just, it's very humbling. And we're just so proud of him and everything that he's worked towards. And he didn't give up, I mean, he did not have an easy road to get to where he is. And I'm so proud of him for that.
That's one of those things that I think that a lot of times people who become, fans of someone or they love him because he is the QB of the Bengals or LSU, whatever it may be, but they don't realize all the things that that we don't see behind the scenes. What is the mother's glimpse in those tough days, the ups and the downs? And, there's accolades galore to list off for Joe Burrow, but there's also been a lot of valleys in there.
Yeah. I think, oh gosh, especially at Ohio State, there were a lot of Sundays that I drove up there just to see him for a few minutes and take him to get a quick lunch or a quick dinner, or even sometimes just an ice cream cone, just so I could like literally see his face and understand if he was really okay. Because you can hear their voices on the phone and they say, "Yeah, mom, I'm fine." But if you really look them in the eye, you kind of have a better insight to how your kiddo is feeling. And so that was so nice that he was close enough to home to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of really tough weeks. And I'm just so proud of him for hanging in there and focusing on his dream, and surrounding himself with really strong friendships at Ohio State also, and staying
Mm-hmm.
close to his high school friends, being willing to talk to us about his struggles. All of those things are so important, I think, to help maintain your strength. You have to have a strong support system around you, whether it's one person or if it's 20 people. You have to have
Absolutely.
that go-to person. And thankfully, Joe had several of those people, and we all definitely worked to talk through things that were hard. And sometimes he wanted to talk and sometimes he didn't, and that's okay. You have to respect that as well. I'm personally not a big talker about a lot of problems. I'm just going to deal with it and move on. But it's hard, and it's really important to maintain that tight bond between your kiddo and you as a parent, and
Mm-hmm.
also make sure that they have a strong support system, that they're when you're not there, that they feel comfortable reaching out to.
I love that advice that you're giving, because even though there's so many listeners who I can't relate to having a quarterback in the NFL son, everything you just said is something that any mom can relate to. And I think we're all looking for those tips of how would you say you were able to keep those lines of communication open with your son? And it is so important. I have a friend that's so funny you just told that story, that had to get in the car recently and just drive 3 hours up to college just to see their face
Mhm.
because of what you said. Like on the phone, they're kind of dealing with things and they just needed to look them in the eye and have that clear, communication to physically see. So I totally get what you're saying and how important that part is. But what is the other, I guess, advice you might give about communication with your kids?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's a boy thing because we don't have any girls, or if it's just in general, but I think as kids are trying to find their independence, they almost feel like they have to work hard to pull away, to find their own way. And I think it's important to respect that, but also make sure that they know no matter what, like you're still always there, even if it's just a quick text of, "Hey buddy, haven't heard from you lately. I'm always here if you need to talk. Do you want me to bring you some food?" Like
That usually works, right?
the food thing is always a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important to just keep those lines of communication open, even if they don't respond,
Right.
because they're still hearing you. Just like when they're in your house and every morning you're telling them, "Okay, it's time to get up." Well, they don't always say, "Okay, mom, I'm going to get up now." Like they're still hearing what you're saying. And you know the voices that we use to speak to our children from the time they're babies all the way through when they're adults, those are the voices that they hear in their heads over and over and over, whether it is, you know, hopefully something positive like, "Let's go, buddy, you can do it." Or
Mhm.
is it, "Hurry up and get your shoes on," and that's all you say before they go to school? Which
Right, right.
sometimes everybody does that too.
We're all guilty of that for sure.
But I think it's so important to have a positive, a positive voice in their head. And as parents, that's a big thing that we can we can send them off with. That's the
Mhm.
power of something that we can do every single day.
Mhm. The other thing you just said that I love, and it's probably, I would say, the number one piece of advice that I feel like I have shared with my kids. As a matter of fact, my son, who's in country music, was doing an interview the other day, and they said, "What's the best piece of advice your mom's ever given you?" And he said this, and I was so glad he did because it's something I've just really hammered in. But it's the importance of keeping that circle tight and small, of who you surround yourself with, who those voices are that you allow to speak into your life.
Mhm.
And when you were just saying that, I was like, oh, absolutely. And it sounds like he's done a great job of that. Does he still tight with some of those high school friends who were positive influences in his life?
He does. They have a um, religiously every Monday night. Still, they have video game night, and so they all get online and do video games together. And I don't know that they even all play, but they all get on their, their earphones and
Yeah.
talk. And that's literally just a few weeks ago. One of his friends got married, and his friend and his now wife wrote their own vows, and it was it was something in her vows that said, "I promise I will always respect your video game night."
Monday nights are sacred. I get it.
So, that's good that he found a sweet little girl that would respect that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's really important to keep those really strong friendships with people that you trust and who can keep you grounded too.
Mhm.
Because as if your kid is in a situation that they're getting elevated and elevated and everybody's talking about them, their brains can start going down a different road. You got to keep them reined in and level headed, and good friendships, strong, long lasting friendships help with that a lot.
Absolutely. And it does seem like you guys have done such a good job. And I know that that's based on his foundation that you guys have given him, but he does really come across so grounded. Like just that, before all of the, what could have caused the ego and the big head and all the things, like before that happened, he was so grounded that he's able to enjoy it, be a part of it, but it not really impact him in a negative way.
Well, I hope so. I hope that it continues to be that way. But I am a strong believer in it takes a village to raise a child, and I think that it's not just our family, but definitely his friends from both high school and college, whether it be Ohio State or LSU. They are all very, very close still. So it's nice to have that strong support system.
As you guys know, I am a huge fan of Barefaced and have been using their skincare consistently for about a year now. My go-to this summer is the Summer Staples Toning Pads Liquid Gold, which is their vitamin C and SPF. I recently learned that vitamin C can make your sunscreen more effective, and that's why this summer I am making sure I include it in my everyday routine. Some vitamin Cs can be a little drying, but Barefaced is a microemulsion with coconut esters, so it is extremely hydrating. And of course, I never go without my SPF. If you're not wearing a daily SPF, investing in skincare is kind of a waste. My personal favorite is the tinted SPF. It is a universal tint derived from iron oxides and not only provides a natural looking glow, but also serves as an extra defense against those dark spots. These products are your summer skincare staples, ensuring your skin stays healthy, nourished, and protected. You can get 15% off your first purchase of summer staples using the code MAMA15 at barefaced.com. Summertime for our family means a lot of travel, and yes, most of the time Tucker does get to tag along. We spend a lot of time in our RV, and that means lots of walks and activities with Tuck. Before we head out, we bathe Tucker with Coat Defense's Sensitive Skin Shampoo. It smells so fresh without being loaded down with chemicals, and his coat stays really soft. We always make sure to pack the Coat Defense Daily Preventative Powder as well. This powder that we just sprinkle on his coat and paws acts like a dry shampoo and works to eliminate odor and repel dirt. Tucker's friends at Coat Defense are offering you 15% off to try any of their awesome products. You can visit coatdefense.com and use the code MAMA15 at checkout.
I want to go back to the Heisman speech night. I mean, it's one of those speeches people still talk about, at this point. And I've heard you and your husband both say you knew he had some notes on a note card, but you had no idea that at that stage he was going to already talk about, or I guess I could say, already use his platform to impact people positively.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be so proud.
So incredibly proud. At the time, in the moment, he was, starting to get really emotional. And in my brain, I just kept thinking, okay, Joe, stay strong, get through the speech. You can do it. You can do it. But then afterwards, as we reflected on that speech, it was so incredibly powerful. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think, obviously the food insecurity piece and all of the amazing donations that our food pantry here in Southeast Ohio received were wonderful. But I think the other piece that sometimes gets overlooked in that speech is him saying, I'm just a kid from Southeast Ohio, and if I can be up here, you can be up here too. Like,
I literally just got chills, and I've heard it before, but I was just
I
like,
almost
wow.
cried again.
Yeah.
Like you just have to believe in yourself, and you have to keep trying, and maybe you won't win the Heisman Trophy, but by golly, you can do amazing things with your life if you really believe in yourself. And um, that is that's the one line that just really gets my heart still.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And I'm sure at the time you weren't even able to look toward the future of what a foundation would look like or
Right.
how do we use this Burrow name to do the next thing. But you guys have done incredible things since then and been able to start, and you and your husband help run the Joe Burrow Foundation,
We do.
which kind of put it in your own words. But my understanding, there's two really important platforms. One is food insecurity, which you talked about. And obviously, Joe was so impacted by what he saw growing up in that area. And then the other is making sure that teens have access to care who are dealing with mental illnesses. Tell me kind of specifically why those two things were initially and still are so important to the foundation.
Yeah, it really, I think it started when I became a teacher. And I would come home and talk a little bit about some of the struggles that some of the kids were having. Um, but then, Joe graduated from LSU and then was drafted during COVID. And so I was at that time an elementary principal. And, my biggest fear as an elementary principal at the time were all of those kids who were struggling, and that we helped every single day to battle, all of those evils that they were dealing with in their minds, and worrying about them because we weren't able to put eyes on them, and we weren't able to help them through those struggles. So I think that so Joe was here in our house during COVID. He had graduated from LSU, was waiting for the draft, and he definitely became very, very aware during that time about how magnified it was becoming. And he certainly had some friends that struggled with mental wellness, I guess, is a, I think more positive way to say it rather
Sure.
than illness. But anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation, all of those things are real, are very, very real, and unfortunately, oftentimes lead to youth suicides and teen suicides, and greater mental health problems. So it's really something that more initially we really wanted to help destigmatize, and we still, that is still a huge focus, like
Yeah.
just talking about it and helping kids know that they can talk about it and having them understand that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, hey, I'm really struggling, and like I don't know how to deal with this. And so it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And so therefore I think Joe saw how special it is to me and how important it is to me. And um, so we all understand that Joe's platform is it's amazing, the people that respond when he is involved in anything, honestly. Like, just the people's response to him in general is crazy to me. But it's a platform that we can't ignore. I think that we have the responsibility to use and to use it for good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the theme, isn't it? Do good.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys have certainly done a lot of good. Is there a special story maybe that just comes to mind about the impact that you guys have been able to have with the foundation?
Yeah. Um, oh gosh, we work initially with the foundation. We really reached out to local nonprofits in the three different markets where we focus: Southeast Ohio and Cincinnati, and also in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And in that initial grant cycle that we did, giving money to local nonprofits, then we spent time learning about those nonprofits after we had granted them, to really understand their impacts in the community. And we have just met so many wonderful, amazing people who are doing so many great things in all of the different places where we focus. And I think in the food insecurity space, I think it's really exciting. My Y in Cincinnati is one nonprofit who has a program called Power of Produce. And Mary Beth goes into elementary and junior high schools, some high schools, and teaches kids about what fresh produce can and eating healthy can do for your body and for your mind. And that's one program that I think is just so important, because I think kids need to be exposed to high quality food and have access to it. And so
It's expensive.
it is
I
very
mean,
expensive.
the healthier you eat, the more expensive it is.
It
It's
really
such
is. It's
a
unfortunate, but that program goes in and teaches kids about the produce and eating healthy, and then also sends them home with fresh produce so that they can take it home and eat it and have access to it. And then on the mental health side of things, there are several different things that we've really focused on. You know, initially, the very first thing we did is we worked with Cincinnati Children's and paid off some bills for some families who were getting ready to lose care for their children because they weren't able to keep up with their bills. And in that process, you know, we met several families who, you know, the things that they're going through are just so heartbreaking. And it was very rewarding and wonderful to know that the money that we were able to give helped keep those kids on track with their recovery, and their families were very, very grateful for it. So that was nice.
That's really admirable work that you guys are doing. And I love that you guys have seen this platform that Joe's been given as a way to bless other people. And that's pretty incredible. We were talking about some of the valleys that he's been in. I mean, he's had a lot of injuries, a lot of things that I think it's interesting. I was trying to remember the wording of how I saw him put it, but basically it was, each time there's an injury, he can't help but think about, is this the elimination or termination is the word he used of his football career,
Yeah.
because it is so dependent on his physical health. How do you keep him encouraged? And what are some of the own, battles in his own mind mentally that he has to work through?
I mean, it's scary as a parent to know that, like, every single play could be his last, depending on what the injury might be, and of course, we're all human, and we all have, our the things that could happen to us that could completely change our life forever. But um, from Joe's perspective, I think it's really something that, especially, like, it but just felt like year after year after year, there was something. I mean, at one point with this last wrist surgery, he had had some kind of a surgery in every year for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So whether it was his non-throwing shoulder, it was his knee when he blew his knee out, then he had his appendix burst, like, it was, it feels like there's always something. He had broken his hand at Ohio State. But so I think it's just so important for parents to really focus on helping their kids stay, like you said before, build grit,
Mm.
build tenacity, keep trying, because when they, it maybe when they're little, it's literally like, okay, we're going to try to catch the wiffle ball, right? But if they give up 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road, like that that tenacity hasn't been building up in their hearts and in their minds, So I feel like
Mhm.
it's really important for parents, any caregiver, because now we know that grandparents are also raising children a lot,
Yes, yes, ma'am.
unfortunately, but that is true. But I think it's just really important for all of us as parents to know and to really believe that we have to really continue to encourage our children to keep trying, and that it's always going to be okay. Maybe you won't be able to play football anymore if you go through this injury. But no matter what, we're going to come out the other side a better person. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to keep going. So, just always those words of encouragement are so important.
I've heard your husband mention in an interview as well that with his, he coached for so many years and was around all of these players, but he had a firsthand insight into how important it is that there's also access for these athletes to make sure they're getting support from counseling or whatever it may be for this very reason. I'm sure you're passionate about that as well.
That is one thing I would really, really encourage any high school parent whose child is getting recruited. I mean, you need to ask those questions when they go on those recruiting trips, as far as what supports are there for their mental health and for their obviously academic support. But I mean, those are things that outside of the sport that they're playing, there needs to be a plan in place so that there are people with eyeballs on them that are really making sure that they are okay, because as a college parent, you don't have eyeballs on your kiddo every day, and you might not be an hour and a half the way that I was from Columbus to drive up there and put my eyeballs on him. So it's just so important that, as a parent, you don't ever stop parenting, right?
Yeah,
You're
it's so
always,
true.
you love them, but you still have to parent them until they say, okay, I've got it now. Like, I've got it. You don't have.
Yeah. Also, I think it's interesting though, because I really did think, I don't know why, but falsely, I thought that as my kids got older, I have two boys. They are 23 and 26, but I thought I'd kind of quit worrying so much at this point. It doesn't happen, does it?
It just changes. And,
What I worry about changes. Yes, exactly.
yeah, it just changes, and you have no control over it.
Exactly.
At least when they're
Exactly.
little, you can put them in their car seat and you
Yeah.
have control of where they're going, right? But
Slap them in or say, we're not going to play with that friend today,
yeah,
because he's not a good influence and you don't get that choice anymore.
no,
Oh,
it's hard. It's really
yeah.
hard. But
Yeah.
that goes to another thing that I say a lot, is be in control of what you can control, and then just manage all of the rest of it. So
Yes. Yes.
it's a worry. It's a big
There's
worry.
days where I want to tattoo let's see, let go and let God, like right somewhere where I see it like every day, because I am not in control. That's for sure.
Oh,
So I wanted to kind of talk about some of the fun things. Okay, so I know what it's like to be at a country music concert and be down in the pit and see my kid up on a stage and singing along and thinking that's so cool. But I cannot imagine when Joe Burrow runs into that stadium, onto that field at a home game and seeing, Burrow all over all the jerseys.
yeah.
I mean, my goodness, what in the world is that like?
All of the jerseys, and when he is announced and runs in and everybody cheers, it's still, I still cry every time. Like, it still brings tears to my eyes. It's just so overwhelming.
I'm
But
sure a sense of gratitude as
oh,
well, right?
yeah, absolutely. It's really amazing. The Bengals fans, the city of Cincinnati, well, the city of Baton Rouge for that matter, and the LSU
Yeah,
fans, they all have just embraced Joe and welcomed him. It feels like deep into their hearts. Like, I just feel like they truly have a love and a passion for him. And
they're so proud of him.
They are. It just feels like it's one huge community and one huge family. So we are just really overwhelmed by it. It's wonderful.
When it was the Bengals who came out and chose your son as the number one draft pick, I mean, could you have written that script any better?
It could not have written it any better. Jimmy and I say all the time, like, I can't imagine, like, when we're sitting at before the game at our tailgate and we think, oh my gosh, we could be like in Miami right now, flying back and forth, like who knows where. And it's just so wonderful. We can hop in our car and be to Joe's front door in 2.5 hours. So it's really a blessing. And we, the Browns, the Brown family have been wonderful. They've been so supportive through Joe's injuries. And we just love the Bengals. We really truly do. I know that any job has its ups and downs, and being a professional football player or musician, any of it, there are ups and downs for sure, and hurdles to cross, or yeah, hurdles to get over. But we for sure think that it's the ideal situation.
Yeah, it definitely sounds that way for sure. What is one of the crazier fan interactions that you have had as mom?
Oh goodness.
Somebody made you some Joe Burrow
Yeah,
earrings. I see
somebody did
those.
make me some Joe Burrow
Those
earrings.
are
Aren't they
great.
awesome? I love them. And then on the other side, they can you see that? Whoops.
Oh, is it the Bengals logo or
It's
yeah,
tiger stripes and with a 9 in the middle of an Ohio.
so cute.
They're very cute. I love them. I definitely get a lot of people that hand me bracelets and earrings, those kinds of things.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think probably the strangest thing is when people yell out like, "Thanks for birthing Joe," or
That's
or
great.
one time we had somebody that said something to the two, Jimmy and I, that wasn't necessarily quite that nice. Like,
Yeah, I'm
"Oh, this
imagining what
is
that
mine."
I'm imagining what that might have been. Oh my. Yeah, how do you react to that? My
I was
goodness.
like, "It's my pleasure,"
That is amazing. That's so fun. One of my favorite facts about Joe Burrow is that there's a penguin named after him.
Oh,
What?
I
At
think
the Cincinnati
at
Zoo?
the Cincinnati Zoo, that is true. There is. Yes, and in Baton Rouge, they named a giraffe after him at the zoo. We have a neighbor down the street that named her kitty Joey Burrow.
Oh my. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, honestly.
You cannot. We've met several children that have variations of Joe's name, like babies. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
I think I've heard you say before that, just despite all the pomp and circumstance and all the excitement in the stadium, that really once the game starts, it's kind of just like watching Joe at any other point. Like whether you watched him in high school on the basketball court or on the football field or in college or whatever, but that at the end of the day, you're really just watching your kid play football.
You really
Love it.
are. You're still just watching your kid play. And,
Yeah.
I was probably honestly more nervous when he was really little than I am now. Now I get worried about him getting hurt.
Yeah.
But I just kind of get more excited about the game. I don't really get nervous because I
Mhm.
know he's got it. I'm nervous before the game, and then once I get into the stadium and see him and see how calm he is, then I'm good. Once I see
Yeah.
him, I'm good because he's just Joe. I mean, he is just steady as can be all the time. So.
Does he get any fashion advice from his mama?
Well, I would say he used to. He has now elevated himself above my capabilities.
Well, no wonder you have to wear the bling to the games and all this stuff. I mean, you are Joe Burrow's mom. He's become like a fashion icon.
Yeah, I would say that he going to Paris Fashion Week, that definitely took him to a whole new level. So I was so excited for him to want to do that and to go and do it. I know that he loved it, so that was exciting.
That is fun. That's so neat. So when we think about all of the personality traits and characteristics and all the things, this is my favorite question, but what would you say that Joe got from his mama?
I would say calmness.
Oh, that's from you.
Yeah.
Okay, my kids did not get that from me. They'd say quite the opposite. Really? So you kind of have that chill, calm, cool, collected personality.
Yeah, I would say that comes more from me than my husband. I don't react to things super emotionally.
Yeah.
Um,
That probably made you a great elementary school principal.
it didn't hurt, that's for sure.
For sure, for sure. Well, it's been so lovely to talk to you, and I'm going to be cheering Joe on. I'm so excited. I'd love to come see him play in person sometime. That'd be so fun. And this has just been a great conversation and really worthwhile too, because I know that the work you guys are doing to help even just awareness about the stigma of, mental health and how important it is that we all kind of have those resources and tap into those as needed. But the work that you're doing to make sure that those who are underserved get to also have those options is a pretty incredible thing. So congratulations to all of you guys.
Well, thank you. We appreciate all of the support that we get for the foundation, and we have very generous donors that allow us to do more than we would be able to do, a lot more than we would be able to do without their support. So we appreciate that and thank them. And if you make it to Cincinnati, for sure, reach out. We would love to host you.
Oh, that'd be so fun. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Well, thanks to Robin for sharing all of the wisdom and so much insight about parenting. I loved learning more about Joe as well as their foundation. Well, once again this week, we had the opportunity to talk to Dr. Harsh Trivedi from Shepherd Pratt. He shares some really useful, practical advice that I am finding so helpful along the parenting journey, and I know that you will too.
Dr. Trivedi is back with us this week on the podcast. Thank you so much again for your time. We really appreciate it.
It's so wonderful being here. Thank you for having me, Jennifer.
We had an excellent conversation with Robin Burrow. I really loved hearing her perspective on so many things. We love what the foundation is about and how he's using his platform to help raise awareness about mental health. And then, of course, helping children in the rural areas where they live in Ohio with food insecurities, which I'm sure often correlate and go hand in hand as well. So she was just fantastic. One of the things that I think resonated the most with me as a mom, and that was when she talked about the importance that she placed, even when Joe was young, on having a strong circle of friendships.
When we're young, I think one of the most important things that we learn is really how to trust other people. And being in situations where not only our parents, but kind of in that broader group of adults, but also even peers that are the same age, if you can test out relationships and what you learn in those interactions is, hey, this person actually cares about me in a genuine way. They're there and they're going to make sure I don't trip up or fall, or they know me well enough to tell me things I didn't see about myself. Those are wonderful lessons as we grow up. And I think being able to really kind of create that peer group or that cohort from a very young age, it's actually really important, particularly as athletes start to succeed, but also when there's then celebrity, because these people have known you from before all of that, and you know that there's a genuineness in those relationships. And so the fact that she's been able to nurture that, for him to, I think, have that stability in those relationships, and then most importantly, there's a base of supporters that are just genuinely there for him. And that makes all the difference in the world, because I think, once you have the fame, it's really hard to figure out, well, who's really here because of money or other things, or who's really here for me. And I'll just say, I think the other part of it, particularly for kids as they're growing up, is how do you develop the skill set to trust yourself in terms of, is this a good person for me to be around? Is this a good influence in my life? And if you can develop those skills early, it also prevents kids from getting into a lot of bad things, which we all know kind of when kids get to a certain age, if the peer group changes, the friends change, the activities change, all of a sudden they could get to things that maybe it's not really part of them, but it is what other kids are happen to be doing at the time. That may also slip up kids as they're trying to become, I would say, really competitive athletes.
One of the things that she talked about that I thought was really interesting is she said that she feels like particularly males, when they reach adolescence, work really hard to separate themselves from the family as they're trying to figure out who they are. And I know I experienced that myself. You and I are both parents of two boys,
Yeah.
so we know what she's talking about, right?
Oh, definitely. I like to share. My wife comes from a household of girls. I have a brother myself, and it couldn't be more different. And I'll just say, it's kind of having currently, I'll just say two preteen and teenage boys. The responses have become one words or maybe even the grunt. And then it's kind of like, well, how do you get them to open up? How do you get them to communicate? I think you're absolutely right. There is kind of this pressure to individuate or to kind of figure out who you are. And it also becomes kind of like not as cool to talk to mom anymore or to kind of share the things that really upset you or bothered you. And I think all of those things kind of come together. And I think one of the things that I would just say, and I think one of the things that's probably important is as your kids age, you have to figure out what's going to help them feel safe, but also comfortable enough to communicate in different ways. And so, what may have worked when they were 4 and 7 and 9 is not going to work when they get to 12 and 16 and 19. And so, I think, usually with girls, there's kind of like this, well, mom and daughter will kind of maybe collide for a bit, but then like she'll come around. I think with boys becoming men, it's a more active struggle in terms of making that connection, but then also kind of figuring out how do you allow him to have his identity, but at the same time, communicating doesn't necessarily mean that you're in some way harming that ability to have your identity. And I think
Yeah,
that's a difficult thing to navigate, and
yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
sure you've had to do that as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And they do kind of come back around to where communication is better, but you got to ride the wave for a little bit. No matter what a mother's child is trying to pursue or wants to be or what to do, what are some of the things that they can do to help build that resiliency and tenacity in children?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's the hardest as a parent to do, but I think is like the key ingredient if you want to develop tenaciousness and grit, is you have to let your kid fall. You have to let them fail. They have like getting those bumps earlier in life when the consequences aren't as extreme become a great way for them to see like, oh, I can pick myself up. I can keep on going even when something doesn't work out well. And I'll just say kind of I think when there are new situations, particularly if you think about a young child doing some things on their own, whether it's riding a bicycle, crossing the street, as a parent, you may recall, like, they turn around and like, oh, how did mom react to this? Like when I fell and scraped my knee, if she's in a panic, the kid ends up in a panic. If mom is feeling confident, they kind of feel like, oh, nothing big has happened, right? And so I think what I'll just say is I think as a society, we've gotten a little bit too overstructured where everything is a team sport and everything is an activity and everything has to happen a certain way. And I think unfortunately we prevent our kids from actually experiencing the highs and lows of life at an earlier age. One of the things you also notice today is just how many more kids are anxious than in the past.
Hmm.
I think part of it is just, between, I'll just say, overstructuring life, but also not having opportunities for more, I'll just say, direct social interactions. We don't have as many opportunities to have, you know, getting into an argument with a friend, having a disagreement about something, having something not work out. And if you can't practice those things as a child, how do you get better at them before you become an adult?
Right. How are you expected to have coping skills as an adult if
Exactly.
you weren't forced to have them when you were a kid? Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
When Joe was at Ohio State, of course, his story is he was at Ohio State and then he left to go to LSU because his experience at Ohio State on the field wasn't necessarily what they had hoped for it to be. There were a lot of disappointments. And she shared how those were the really tough days. And they lived a couple of hours away, and she would talk to him on the phone, and he'd say, I'm okay, everything's fine. But there were times where she just had to get in the car to go see him face to face to know for herself.
I think this is one of the hardest transitions that so many families go through, which is really kind of your child is now graduated from high school. They have this amazing future ahead of them. They get into the dream school or somewhere else. And whether they're in a dorm that's 2 miles away or they're literally across the country, this is the first extended separation from parents. And I think this is one of the things that's really hard, which is if you don't have the tenacity part and you don't have good communication part built in, which she had both of those, you heard about her still feeling like, well, I'm not exactly sure what's going on with my child. And so, I mean, luckily she was able to pop into a car and go and see him. I think one of the other things that just comes up is that parents are often so anxious to even talk about some of the mental health struggles or academic struggles their child has had because they're trying so hard for their child to get into this college. They don't communicate to the college or to the counseling center, oh, by the way, my child has these needs. And now the child is not just in a brand new place, they're in a dorm, different people, different rules, but also completely without supports.
Yeah, I think it's very promising to hear how much statistics are up in college students who actually are seeking and taking advantage of therapy programs that are on campus. You taught us last week it's okay to not be okay, and that's what we need to make sure our kids are aware of.
No, I definitely agree with that. Over 20 years ago, I was actually working in the US Senate and worked on a bill called the Garrett Lee Smith Memorial Act, which actually provided funding 20 years ago to build out more college mental health centers across the nation. So across all 50 states, 9 tribal territories, that bill has funded building more of these services. And back then, 20 years ago, it's because in that particular summer, we had a spate of suicides on college campuses at some pretty big name Ivy League schools, but also kind of across the country. And I think, what we're seeing is really that need has only gotten greater. And we're seeing, honestly, because of good treatment, a whole generation of kids who are actually able to get into college that may have actually dropped out before or not been able to kind of succeed academically as well. And I think that's all, I think, has caused this wonderful, I'll just say, shift where this younger generation is not only expecting the help, but whether it's in college or then as they get into the workforce, they're expecting their employer to not just that they would be open about it, but that the employer will be supportive to their needs and actually help them with succeeding at work, but also with their mental health.
Robin gave fantastic advice for parents who are in that recruiting process and going around and looking at different schools and trying to figure out the best fit for their child. The importance of, not only what are the workout facilities, what does their academic schedule look like, but how do you plan to provide mental health support for my athletes?
I think this is really a kind of a mental shift that we have to take on as, I'll just say, slightly older adults compared to our kids in kind of thinking about, well, addressing this, taking care of it. Actually, it's a sign of maturity. It's a sign that maybe these kids are more likely to do well through their athletics and get to better results, which is what the schools are interested in as well. And maybe being more honest and forthright about that actually helps kids place to the right team to be on. And honestly, if you bring it up and then the school is maybe not as open to those kinds of thoughts, that may actually not be a great place for your child to go for their next stage of their athletic career.
Well, let's wrap up. I just know that you are probably thrilled anytime you hear of someone who has such a big platform like Joe
Yeah.
Burrow has, that they really have dedicated themselves to helping others to make sure that mental health is at the forefront of people taking care of themselves.
What I love, I would just say, is obviously his mom has had a tremendous influence on him, but he also is showing immense maturity himself. And I think just the notion of starting a foundation as early as he has, focusing in specifically on mental health needs, as well as some food insecurity issues in the communities that he comes from. Uh, there is nothing more rewarding than, I'll just say, paying back or paying it forward for that next generation. Every community across the nation, I will say, is struggling with how to manage mental health issues. And I think that's exactly why, places like Shepherd Pratt and then the Joe Burrow Foundation are there, because we are trying specifically to make an impact locally and nationally, and most importantly, in the lives of those who are most vulnerable.
Absolutely. And Shepherd Pratt is making a difference as well. Thank you so much for all that you guys are doing. We want to make sure that people know that Shepherd Pratt is an excellent resource for people to check out, learn more about. You guys have partnered with facilities all over the country. So we're really want to encourage people that are asking questions, or if you've resonated with something in this conversation, it's shepherdpratt.org. And we just appreciate Dr. Trivedi and your wisdom that you bring us in this series. And we look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us on. And most importantly, thank you for these amazing interviews that you're having with these moms, because I think you're getting to the heart of a lot of the things that they are thinking about, and I think being incredibly planful about to get to success. And all those things are wonderful in terms of helping many other moms and families succeed as well. So thank you.